Good evening and welcome. A bit of a hiatus. This is Burlington and beyond. We have not spoken to you. It's been a couple of months. We are thrilled. When I say we, I speak for this particular group, that my friends. I am the one that is holding the fort tonight. They are not available, but will be in the future. This is the 102nd edition of Burlington and Beyond. I anticipate at least 120, 125 programs. The difference, which is whatever 23 programs we do have. I've had people who have contacted me. I'm not going to read the names of the people, but they're local, they're state, and one or two of them are national. As well as a very controversial businessman that I will tell you about, not tonight, at another time. At any rate, tonight we are very, very privileged to have a gentleman who was with us a long time ago, and he was kind enough, bear with me, he was kind enough to agree to come back and talk to us about a lot of new developments in Burlington. And Burlington warrants a lot of discussion because there have been so many changes and plans for the future. Things are happening in Burlington. And you, the citizens, if you're not quite aware of it, I'm hoping that you'll get a lot of information here on the show tonight and in the future. At any rate, the gentleman that I'm talking about here on my right is Dr. Edward Weiner. 31 years?
31.
31 years with the Burlington Board of Health. Donated his talent, all of his energy for all of these years, and in my estimation has done a remarkable job. I have a history in Burlington, so I'm pretty much aware of what has changed in the town, but I want to hear it from him. I'm going to turn it over to him in a minute after he tells us how he is, how he's feeling, how his family is, and then I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about himself, his background, and bring us up to snuff before we get into Burlington and what's happening. Good evening, and thank you, sir.
Thank you for I'm really happy to be here again. My name's Ed Weiner, and I have been
Dr. Ed Weiner.
Dr. Ed Weiner. I have a PhD in biological sciences, specifically in hematology. And I've been on the Burlington Board of Health for 31 years. I've been privileged to be elected 11 times in this town.
God bless you. Yeah.
The first time I ran, it was contested, but I've enjoyed a lot of time on the board. Specifically, I grew up in Malden, just like you, Pat.
Yep.
I grew up in Malden.
Maldenites, the two of us.
Malden. I grew up in sort of an inner city area. I grew up there. I was educated there. I went on to Northeastern University. I was in their co-op program and became a medical technologist and worked at Union Hospital during Northeastern times while I went to school. And I went to school as I worked full-time both. I slept at the hospital 3 nights a week for 15 years on call, putting myself through college. From there, I went on to Boston University and received a master's degree and a doctorate. And then I needed a job. I looked around and I received a wonderful opportunity to come and teach in a program at University of Massachusetts in Lowell. I spent 10 years there. I became tenured. I was in charge of their graduate program in clinical laboratory sciences, a program which I wrote and brought to the Board of Regents at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And then one day, I received a call from what they call now a headhunter, an employment man. He said, "We know who you are, and we would like to invite you to come to work for a tiny new company of 300 people. Well, I said, I'm tenured. I have a job for life. But the offer was just too amazing. And I went to my wife and she says, let's try it. Took a leave of absence and that was it. I spent 25 years at what is now AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals. I started with 300 people.
Wow.
And it is now 59,000 individuals worldwide. I spent 25 years retired from there. They gave me a little bit of a golden parachute for a couple of years, and now I'm doing some consulting for a number of companies around the United States. But my absolute real job, the thing that I love, as most passionate about my family and my friends, is the Burlington Board of Health. This is my town, and that's my group. And I am as excited, committed as I was in 1989 as I am today. And most of you have seen me around town, and most of you have asked me every question you could possibly think of, and I've answered it. Or you've called me on the phone. I still take every phone call. But yes, Burlington is my home.
I'm amazed. I really am. I think that is a wonderful story, and I personally am very happy that you not only came to Burlington, but that you have seen the growth in Burlington that has been close to phenomenal in terms of not only the number of people, but the kinds of businesses. And even now, I remember hearing just recently, as a matter of fact, I think it was Kristen Kastner, who talked about energizing their efforts to get life science outfits here in Burlington, specifically to reach out in California to get them. I'm not sure of exactly how one goes about doing that. Is that a plan that is not focused, but something that is sort of on the grill at the moment?
You can't talk about biotech and that type of development in this town without talking about a little history. And that is, during World War II, post-World War II, the Cold War, and right up through the Vietnam War, there were a lot of companies in Burlington who were technologically based. Unfortunately, some of those did not help this community. Some of those contaminated Burlington significantly. In 1989, it became my number one focus, which remains today. We got to clean up this town. When we talk new development now, we're talking about a whole new generation of scientific types of companies. We're talking about companies who are regulated, as they were not regulated, are regulated now by the 6 or so federal agencies, things like EPA, OSHA, the DEA, 4 state agencies, the Department of Public Health, Department of Fire Sciences, DEP, and most of all, local, the Board of Health. In fact, I'll go as far as telling you the story that the town meeting realized that we had a problem in this community, and they placed under the Board of Health an environmental engineer. We actually have a professional in this community that not only inspects and will continue to inspect all of the companies that use any types of hazardous materials in this community, but also prevents problems from happening. The Board of Health, under a number of us who've been here, not only do we have the hazardous materials bylaw, which severely restrict the problems what we had and they won't occur again, but the hazardous materials bylaw restricts those issues and those types of things. But we also have a recombinant DNA regulation. Who knew that in 1989 we'd be talking about recombinant DNA in Burlington? And we do. Lots of these companies are here now. We have in Burlington right now 14 companies which do biotech. Now they do include Leahy Clinic. Leahy Clinic does a lot of top-level, internationally recognized research. And they do recombinant DNA. But we have all kinds of other companies. We have not only the hospitals, but we have device companies. We have a lot of research companies around drugs and other types of pharmaceuticals, all doing this type of research in this community. And so let's put this in perspective that yes, we would like these types of companies to come to our community, Burlington, but we want special companies, and these are the types that we're looking for. Companies involved in nanotechnology. For those scientists, 10 to the minus 9. You know what I'm talking about. We're talking about 8 zeros, a point, 8 zeros, and a number, and a 1. So we're talking about companies that know how to use tiny, tiny amounts of chemicals to get where they need to in terms of experimentation. And with a high oversight, these are the companies we need in town. They're clean because of the oversight. They pay taxes. They spend a lot of time in trying to educate our community.
And if they are successful, it redounds to the town in notoriety and it just in so many little ways.
Not only notoriety, but also they are interested in giving back to their community.
Yeah.
This is a type of community they're interested in. They're interested in a well-run municipal community that wants to work with them, understanding, wants to inspect them, and they have to go through that. Remember, some of these companies even are required to have a public board in which we would have a representative from our community sitting on that, which is usually our environmental engineer, and a second member of their committee, usually somebody like James Harrison, who is an experienced scientist who has worked on these types of experiments in the past, and he comes and helps us with the oversight. This is a community effort to bring good companies, good scientists to a good place.
Not too long ago, I attended a meeting here at the town hall where it was a bit of a seminar. I think you were there. Seminar with regard to how can we best invite or try to extend a welcome to some of the life science companies. And there was some discussion about the nature of the buildings that they want. Has it ever been considered that instead of the company building the building, that we, the town, build the buildings and rent them to them with all of the specs for a life science situation, or is that taboo?
I don't know if it's taboo. It's certainly it sounds innovative, but many of these companies, and I'm only speaking off the top of my head, require specific types of buildings, of rooms, specific types of places where technology must take place. And they're all different. Every single company that we talk to are different. Some of them can come into town and we can redevelop in some of our older buildings, but some we just need brand new. What we need to have in town, and what I think the Planning Board, the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, we're all working together along with the selectmen in making sure that this place is somewhere where they would like to come because we want to work with them. We want to work with them, and as part of the Board of Health, I will tell you, I want to work with them under one category, and that is safety. I don't want to in any way put that aside for whomever wants to come here. I want to make sure their processes are clean, they're not going to be polluting, that they're safe for not only the people of this community, but also the people who work within those buildings.
Sure.
Now, it's true that there are state and federal regulations, but still we need to make sure that they understand how we feel and that they want to be here. Whether that falls under the guise of some type of tax relief, I don't know. I'm not going to get involved in that. My job is to make sure that they're safe. Clean, yeah, and appropriate.
Yeah. Has your department ever come across or tried to estimate the percentage of people, Burlingtonians, people who live in Burlington, who work in these health science in particular?
I don't know. I don't think
Okay,
we ever
okay.
have done that. We do a survey, we do our annual census, but I don't think we ask that question. I think that's a question for Amy,
Yeah.
Our town clerk.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to you. Now, God bless you, you're an active man. You have been for a long time. You're still filled with energy. It's very obvious. Tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, I have a wife of almost 42 years next week, October 8th.
Next
42
week?
Next month, is it?
Next month, is it?
42, October 8th. We've married 40. We got married young when I had nothing, and she was 20 years
She
old.
from Malden?
No, she was from Reading. She was way out in the country. Reading, for me to meet somebody in Reading, oh my gosh.
I'll tell you what my mother said. Go ahead.
Anyway, she is my inspiration. She motivates me. She gets me into all kinds of messes by saying, Ed'll do it. She's a brilliant woman who's very involved in a number of her hobbies. We do share some of the same hobbies. We're both amateur geologists. That's something new in our lives over the past 25 years. But I have 2 children. I have a daughter, Shoshana. She is a litigating attorney and a partner in a law firm in the Washington, D.C. area.
Oh boy, God bless her.
Yeah, she's a litigator. She's in court. And then I have a son. Now, my son, both of these went to school in Burlington. My son has a doctorate in pharmacy and an MBA. And right now, he's a top executive with a company called Sanofi Genzyme, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. In fact, he has the same type of job that I had when I worked for AstraZeneca. I said to my son when he was 10 years old, and I brought him to one of my speaker programs, and in those days you could, I said, "What do you want to do?" He says, "I want your job. How do I get it?" And I said, "You got to get a doctorate." So he did. He said, "I'm there." He got his doctorate, he got his MBA, and he's brilliant. He's a character. And
What's his name?
Jonathan.
Jonathan.
Jonathan Weiner. He's extremely charismatic. I don't know where that came from. I don't have it. My wife doesn't have it. My daughter doesn't have it. But Jonathan walks into a room and lights up the room. He's very charismatic, and
That's wonderful. You've got to be very, very proud
I'm happy.
of both of them. Yeah. And yet you're still going. You're still a relatively young man. It looks like you've still got a lot of energy, and I'm hoping that you plan on staying in Burlington, because I think we've gotten to a point where we really need you. Yes, we do. We need you. We need someone with your capacity, your ability to oversee so much of what goes on in town. That's critical.
3
That's
meetings
important
ago
stuff.
at the Board of Health office, I was going nose to nose with a good lawyer, a good guy, Rob Buckley from Raymer and Bronstein. And he just gets frustrated with me sometimes because I am so Burlington-centric. And he looked at me and says, "Dr. Weiner, when are you going to retire?" And I looked at him on camera and
Never.
I said, my goal in life is to die right in this chair,
wow.
yelling at you and protecting the community. And he laughed in jest.
Let's talk a little bit about Burlington specifically. You've seen an enormous amount of growth in town here. I expect, I think you may know, I'm a town meeting member, and we just got a big notification on Nordblom. They are looking to develop 300 more units, but it's symptomatic. I mean, I don't know if we have the room. I don't know if we can do it. I don't know all of those questions. But generally speaking, you have seen the growth here in Burlington. Where do we go from here? We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to life sciences in particular, I have in mind.
I don't think we have a choice. Our geography is perfect.
Yep.
We have a lot of buildings that are coming down and can be redeveloped.
Yeah.
We have a number of owners who have decided that, yes, they want to stay in this community. I think we have no choice. The key here is development is okay if it's done appropriately within the guise of what our founding fathers set up, what they wanted here. And look at some of the development here. Take a look at what we have over towards the Building 19 and a half area. It's going to be beautiful. I don't know if there's going to be more people in town, more shoppers in town. Look at all of the different places. Look along 128, our edge city. A lot of that development replaced some ugly and old stuff.
Yeah.
Look at the areas around with the old high voltage engineering area, which was totally polluted.
Yeah.
And what happened there? It's been completely cleaned up. And with good companies there now. Leahy Clinic is here to stay. We need good development, good redevelopment. A lot of people say to me, look what they just did. They tore down that house and they put up a McMansion. How many times do I hear that? Well, people buy the land and they have a right to put up a McMansion.
Yes.
I understand that, but look what was there before. In some cases, 5 houses from me, they just tore down a house. The house looked beautiful on the outside, and I just couldn't believe they're going to tear it down for a McMansion. And the new owner said to me, because I kind of peeked in to see what I could see because I didn't want to get involved. The Board of Health is involved with the demolition and to make sure the appropriate demolition. But he said, well, you want to come in? And I said, he said, you're the chairman of public. I'll come in and tell you, let me show you why. Let me show you why we're taking this house down. And I went in, and it was all mold.
Okay.
It was destroyed inside. It was all mold.
Yeah.
The house is going to come down, and a beautiful house will be placed there.
Yep.
You know what? Times change. The world changes.
Yep.
Burlington will change.
Yep.
We just got to have the people here to say, let's take a step back and to make sure that that change is appropriate. Again, someplace which is clean, safe, and appropriate for this community.
I have a very dear friend who went through that very same experience. As a matter of fact, he put an article in the paper complaining. He has one of the smaller homes in town, and I'm not going to use his name or anything, and they built a McMansion right next door to him. The house that they took down was, I don't know about the inside, but it was relatively dilapidated. It was used up. And they put up a McMansion. He was upset because this house towered above his house, you know. I didn't know what to say to him. I tried to console him, and I said, well, you know, it's progress. I said, and your value for your home has just gone up. I don't know how many dollars, but it certainly has gone up because you have a home now that's worth over $100,000 next door to you. So there is a good side to it. And it is, like you say, it's progress. You can't stop it, no matter what you do. Somebody is going to come in with a better idea, a bigger idea, and we have no choice but to honor it.
And we have to understand also, I had to deal with a family who sold a large plot of land that was forest. It's a forest, and it was forest, and it was unused property, and the family sold it. And then they complained when the developer who came in there put up houses, that they're going to be putting up houses here. They're going to be putting up buildings here. Well, if you're going to sell the land, and the new person owns the land, and the land is going to be appropriately developed, you can't complain.
No. That's a definition of progress. No matter how you look at it, it is progress. It doesn't satisfy everyone, but it is stepping forward for the community. There's so many aspects to you. I don't know I don't know what to ask you.
I want to continue along the population of Burlington.
Okay.
This is something that I talk about all the time, and I want people to understand that Burlington is not the 23,000 people that are here. Burlington is much larger. As chairman of public health, I am at war, figuratively. I disagree with the Department of Public Health all the time in Massachusetts because Burlington is very unique. During the evening hours, we have 23,000 people here. Residents who live here, who sleep here. However, the next morning, especially around the shopping time, around Christmas, we come close to 250,000
Oh
people.
my
a
God, I
quarter
didn't
of a
realize
million.
it was that much.
So when you talk to me about Board of Health and appropriate development,
Wow.
it's also this town has a lot of responsibility for appropriate planning, safety planning, emergency planning, and that's where Board of Health comes in. That's where we come in many ways. We have a medical reserve corps. It's called the Burlington Volunteer Medical
Yep.
Reserve Corps. We have over 160 people, both lay as well as professionals, medical professionals and other professionals who come together, who drill, who go to meetings, who come to educational programs all year long. And we sort of get together and plan just to make sure that if we have an emergency in our quaint little evening community, which isn't so quaint in the
Not during the day.
during the day, that we can respond to emergencies. We have an outstanding fire department. We have an outstanding police department and DPW. But we also have a Board of Health, which is all ready to roll, but also 160 other volunteer members in this community. And we are our own Medical Reserve Corps. We broke away from the regional group about 15 years ago. It was a very major effort, which I spent a lot of time, even with our congressman. But we're individual. We're all by ourselves, and that's a good thing because we have such commitment in this community. So Burlington is a very, very interesting place. It is quaint. In some cases, it's some cases I even considered sort of rural when I look around some of the places. And I look at the old farm right next to the old meeting, our old meeting house, right next to the Board of Health office and senior center. On the other hand, we are the 21st century.
I have to tell you about my mom. When I first when we were married back in 1963, and a dear friend of ours convinced us to come and look at land in Burlington. And I live at the very end of Skilton Lane. Skilton Lane was all wood. There was no street there. It was just gravel. But when I told my mother that my wife and I, my future wife at that time, we were going to try to buy a piece of land and build a home in Burlington, she said, Burlington? But that's on the frontier. She lived in Medford. That's on the frontier. Like it was, and it was at that time. It was. And as I think back, and as I listen to you in terms of the changes today, the other thing is that the changes seem to be faster now than they were then. It took a little time to change a business, for one to drop out, another one to come in and assume that everything that they were selling food-wise was taken care of and clean. It took a while. It took a long time. I know I was in the business myself, and I did my darndest, but there were times when it was difficult. You have a big staff now. Is it adequate?
Let me tell you what the staff is now, and then I'll tell you what's adequate.
Okay.
For a community of size and what we're responsible for, I have a director of public health. That wasn't there when I first started. I brought it to town, director of public health. We have the environmental engineer whom town meeting placed with the Board of Health, and not with the selectmen and not with the DPW and nowhere else. Put it with the Board of Health. They put it there in the early 1980s, you might remember. We have a health agent who coordinates all our inspections, and we have an inspector. We also have a town nurse, and I can talk to you about some of the duties. For
That's
instance,
a full-time?
That's a full-time job. You only knew what the town nurse does because of the diverse and population in this community. the, the town nurse is involved in all kinds of programming, as well as we have two full-time administrative staff. With all that's going on in this community, we are darn busy. Remember, the Board of Health is not just involved in food and restaurants. That's your old grandfather's Board of Health. We review everything from camps. We're involved in emergencies, environmental emergencies, public health emergencies, fire and housing emergency. We run the Medical Reserve Corps. We're involved in every step of the development of this community. People forget that under the Subdivision Control Act of Massachusetts, it's the Board of Health which controls that development. Under the famous lawsuit of Independence Park versus the town of Barnstable, where that authority over development when it comes to subdivisions was said. Why with the Board of Health? Because it's the agency of Paul Revere. Paul Revere put the laws together for towns like the town of Boston. He was the first public health official in the United States. But every bit of development through site plans has to come through the Board of Health for review. We're in charge of the mosquito program in town and coordinating it. Our health nurse is not only involved in flu vaccines and giving inoculations and blood pressures. Yeah, I can go back to that at the end, Household Hazardous Waste Day. But we have an environmental engineer in town who does all kinds of things, not only coordinates the cleanup in this communities to make sure that the companies who come here, that the DEP, that everybody's who working together to clean up Burlington, but also we coordinate with police and fire. You know, 3 weeks ago we had a program, and I never thought we'd see this program in Burlington, with the Burlington Medical Reserve Corps and the Board of Health. I went to this program, and we were all had to sit together with the police and fire, who taught the course on Narcan.
Oh.
So
yeah.
even now, the Medical Reserve Corps and members of the Board of Health can respond to even drug overdose emergencies.
Wow.
We're involved in all kinds of projects. If you think it's going on in town, the Board of Health is involved in it. Now, you asked me about staff. Well, that's kind of a hot potato. As we grow, and as I just drove here past the additional restaurants at the mall that'll replace the Sears Automobile Center.
That's exactly what I had in mind.
You had
That's it.
there. It
I
is.
thought of Dr. Weiner, and I said, this all has to be covered in so many different ways. You don't just build buildings.
Not only were we involved in the development under the site plan, we were involved in discussions around what the restaurants would look like and their capabilities and how they needed to be put together and their requirements. But now they have to be inspected. It's not just a one and done. Could we use another inspector? And the answer is yes. Could we use another administrator? The answer is probably. What we really need in town, because we've gotten so big and we're involved in so many high-level projects, we really could use an assistant director of public health is what we really need to look for.
I was quite moved when you come in to say thank you for the vehicle that the town finally agreed to buy you. And it was more than conspicuous that it was needed because in so many different ways, I hear or have heard about the growth of your department. And there's an awareness, and I'm sure most of the population is aware of it too. Your stamp has to go on everything, literally everything.
Well, I'll tell you about the vehicle. The vehicle finally came to fruition.
I voted for it.
I know you did.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your vote. In fact, it was unanimous. One of the few things.
Yes, it was.
It was unanimous that I've seen.
I threatened the others, and I said, "This, I know Dr. Weiner, and he is sincere. They need it." Anyway,
we have a community flu clinic every year.
yeah.
That community flu clinic is not really it's really not just a time when we give out. It's a drill. Can we set up? Can we mobilize, set up, inoculate 300 or 400 people and break down and then restock and go back to the board? Can we do that in a very specific amount of time? If the state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, called us up and said, you have an emergency in your region, can you mobilize? Can you do those things? The answer is sure. But unfortunately, the first phone call we have to make when we set that up is to a rental agency for a vehicle.
Okay. I knew that was coming.
You know that was coming.
Yeah.
I used to say that that's the first thing that's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
Before we call the police, we're going to have to call Hertz or Avis or National, whoever. We're going to have to call because we need a vehicle. And if it's an emergency, do you think we're going to get one?
Yeah.
The answer is ridiculous. No. We need something to be able to move our vaccines,
Right.
our critical things without having to call. The police, who in an emergency will be very busy. The DPW, who has been very helpful, along with the police and fire, who are wonderful. They're going to be doing their own thing without
Yes.
trying to
Yep.
find a vehicle to send to the Board of Health. We now have something. And the thing that topped it off, the frosting on the cake was, we have to go to fires in many cases. If there's a fire, we have to go there. And I've got lots of interesting stories about fires, but if there is a food establishment that has a fire,
Okay.
the Board of Health has to be there right away.
Yeah.
Our Director of Public Health, Susan Luminello, one of the most committed professionals in this community, she got in her car because we don't have an official car, and she tried to get there, and the poor police didn't recognize her car
Oh, boy.
because they didn't see her and they didn't recognize the car.
Yeah.
And she had to sit in traffic trying to get through to get to an emergency.
Yeah.
We needed something that is visible enough for people to get in, to emergency people from the Board of Health to get in and get there.
Right.
And that's what we have now.
Right.
Even town hall, under the selectmen, they have a number of emergency cars there for that type of. We're not involved in that. They're always being used appropriately, I'm sure. And clearly we needed something. And it's coming. Hasn't come yet. We've been waiting. In fact...
Oh, you don't have it yet?
No, we don't. In fact, it came in a little above budget, and Mr. Sanchez from the DPW graciously out of his budget gave us a few extra dollars to make sure that it's going to.
Isn't that nice?
So people in this town work together.
Yeah. I'm going to have John on. I will specifically thank him for that.
You can ask him about his background, the things he does. We have some real amazing,
There's some great people.
some real
Yeah.
great people. You know, I have some notes here, and when you start talking to people, you never know.
Yeah.
You never who they really are, what they've really done. We find out that people in this community, our community, they may be so-and-so and so-and-so. You find out they're pretty nationally recognized in some cases, and in some cases, world recognized. And if you don't sit and talk to them, you never find
Yeah.
out.
I've heard that on a couple of occasions, that Burlington is known, in my particular instance, especially on the West Coast, they're very much aware of Burlington. I don't know if it's the competitiveness or simply awareness because of things that have been done in the companies here or what, but there are a lot of people who are very much aware of Burlington. And there are a lot of people who want to move into Burlington. I don't know how much room we have for growth. We're, as you indicated, 25,000 people, which is the bedroom, the people who live here. And during the day, you estimated 200,000 people?
Or more.
Or more.
Around Christmas time. How many malls do we have? How many places do we have that people come to? Look at the companies that have come to this community. Keurig, that one just came to me. Keurig is here.
Big plant, too.
I see my Keurig. If my refrigerator died and my Keurig coffee maker died, I'd have to get the coffee maker first. But Keurig is here. Oracle is here. Look at how many. We have a Wegmans here.
Yeah, Leahy.
Leahy is
Yeah.
a world. It's now Leahy Beth Israel,
Leahy Beth Israel,
which
yes.
makes it even more.
They have grown, yeah.
They have all of these companies. I could go on and on with the number and types of companies in this community. I urge everyone to, when they drive by Wegmans, to just take a ride around what's right after them. There are some amazing biotech companies, device companies, companies known all over the world. There's one company in this community which is run by a Nobel laureate.
Oh, really?
Not a Nobel laureate in science, a Nobel laureate in peace. He was one of Physicians for Social Justice that now he has chosen this community to put his company
Wow. I didn't.
Infraredx and Dr. Jim Muller.
That is the gentleman, Dr. Jim Muller.
Dr. Jim Muller, well known. He and Sid Alexander from Leahy Clinic got together with a few others, and they received the Nobel Prize for what they did as young physicians. Who knew that Burlington? But there are so many in the area of bioterrorism, in the area of science, in the area of education. There are so many people here who are pretty well known. And all we have to do is stop and ask and speak to people.
Amazing. And I'm so happy that you're so well versed. You have an inside picture of what's going on. That's critical.
I like people. I like to talk to people. I worked in a job where I was sat on an airplane 2 or 3 days almost every week. Day trips here, day trips there. I've spoke to people from all over the world. You know what? You never know who you're sitting next to. And that pertains to Burlington too. You never know. I have talked to police officers who have huge, interesting stories. I've talked to firemen too. I've talked to all kinds of people throughout this community, each one. I even have one that I need to tell you that I have volunteered to interview, and that is Pat Marino, who has a fabulous story to tell. And on camera here, I'm going to urge him to let me interview him sometime, because his story is just magnificent. You just got to ask.
We will. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it. And I appreciate that very, very much, being recognized in that way. My own neighborhood, and this is to underscore the fact that Burlington is well known, not only here in the Northeast, but I suspect there are people around the world who are very much aware of the town of Burlington in different ways. It's not like there's an advertisement for Burlington, but as I mentioned a few moments ago, I have people from Zimbabwe who moved in. I have no idea why. I know the gentleman. I know where he works. He's a delightful man, but I just never expected two people from a family, 4 of them, from Zimbabwe. Before them, there was a family from Kenya in the neighborhood. Next door to them, big McMansion, an Indian family. So there's something about Burlington that is attracting, and I think it's all of the things that you mentioned that is attracting people to come here. If they're going to move into the Massachusetts area, the Northeast, then this is one of the communities that evidently sticks out that they want to find out about. It's too bad we don't have more space.
You got to love this community. We have every single type of ethnic group. We have every single type of religious group. We have a mosque in town. We have a synagogue temple in town. We have churches of every denomination. I hear now that St. Malachi's and St. Margaret's are coming together, but it's a huge and beautiful place. Everything's here. And do you remember, I was so proud. Last year, somebody defaced a sign of a religious group.
Yep.
And the community came together and cleaned it the next day. There was no question. That's what happened. It was cleaned the next day by these people. We're having on our, I think it's the 31st of September, we're having Diwali Indian
the
celebration.
Indian celebration.
It's going to be fabulous here. We have had all kinds of celebrations. It's a testament of who this community is. It really is.
There's a sense of internationalism about there's no doubt about it. There is. I mean, you see it in so many different ways, and yet, exactly. And you know what? This the 19 and a half project. I have had Mr. Duffy, who was one of the developers for that 19 and a half, that whole project, and he spoke in terms of internationalism too. I remember when him talking about hoping that the people who not only came there, that the shops that they had, that they intended to have, would attract more people. Are we running? Are we okay? Okay. Sometimes they want to get my attention but we're okay. Do you know what I'm saying? There's and that even that development, and there continues to be developments in town. You know, there's one thing after another. I think it's wonderful. I have been here for 55 years, and I can't tell you how much development I've seen. Go ahead. You wanted to say.
One of the most important things about this community, and as long as I got to talk about this, is our form of government. It's so important that this form of government stays here. It works. We have more than 100 town meeting members. We have all of our major elected boards. We have a town administrator, not a mayor. We have 5 selectmen, all elected. If you don't like them or what's going on, you don't vote for them. You vote them out. So many people are watching the cookie jar. It is so important that I say that. There are so many town meeting members who call me because they see something. Never happened in a city. There are so many other members of the boards. I sit down and we talk. And you know what? They're as passionate and committed as I am, because they know if they don't do the right thing, they're gonzo, because this community knows how to vote people out. And it has. Look at the selectmen, look at the whatever off. They know how to vote them out. I keep hearing every once in a while we should go to a different type of government. I got to tell you, they'd be making a big mistake. This form of government. And I tell people that I don't like possibility of one group getting more powerful than another group. We have the checks and balances in this community. Yeah. If they don't like me, they can vote me out.
I don't know if it's because of this particular show and what I try to do, but I have been very fortunate in being next to some of the principals who run the town here, the fire chief, Chief Yetman, who just recently resigned. He retired, I should say. Mr. Sagarino, whose mother I knew personally, and he's very capable. Mr. Denizio, the accountant. I've met all of them on a one person-to-person basis, and I can't find. It's difficult to say anything bad about any of them, and not bad, but to come up with something that you think that they may not be doing correctly or whatnot. I think they're all doing one heck of a job. They come together, they do very, very well.
Look at this community. Look at our tax rate.
Yeah.
Look at what we have here.
Yeah.
Look at what our kids have here, our seniors have here.
Yeah.
Look at what I have here and you have here. This isn't put together by a mayor. This isn't one done by a single board. This is being done by a group of boards, a group of people, and a town meeting, which can be as tough can be, and I hope they stay as tough can be, looking out for this community.
Yeah, they do. No, I completely agree with you. I don't know how much time we have left. We have gone through a lot. You've elucidated so many different things. I want to know more about you. What do you do with those few moments that you get when you're free? You told me something about you were writing. I'd like to know what you're writing.
Well, let me start to tell you that I don't have a lot of hobbies except I collect a few antiques. I collect microscopes and mining equipment.
Oh, God.
Now, why mining equipment? Because I'm an amateur geologist, and I spend time on some weekends going to old mining areas, and we dig in the dumps, so we do what we have to do and to get minerals and sometimes some types of semi-precious stones, but we go out and dig. My wife sure doesn't look the part, but we have a good time. It's been a family hobby and a fun family hobby.
Wife's name first.
Elaine.
Elaine.
Elaine is the heart and soul of the North Shore Rock and Mineral Club. I invite you all to join. There are many members, even though it meets in Hamilton, Wenham. A lot of members from Burlington are from here in this region. But I do some of that. I do some of that. In terms of whatever I do with my time, I spend some time writing. Began writing some of my memoirs in the forms of
Where
short
did you
stories.
learn how to write? Or are you learning as you learn? Or are you learning as you write?
Well, I've always written. You know, when you have a doctorate, you read a
Reports
couple of
and,
books,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I've always had to write as a professor. I always had to write, publish or perish. But I bought Nuance software. That's Dragon software that they make in Burlington. It's internationally housed here in Burlington. And I sit in front of my computer and I tell a story every once in a while. And I just turn it on and I just talk. And it's all there. It learned my voice. It's all there. I got the whole chapter written out. I go back, clean it up a little bit, which it might not have understood a word or two, or put in some punctuation I missed. And it's there.
What is it called again?
It's voice activated software, voice to print software.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah. Okay.
It's called Dragon. And the only reason I bring it out is because it's here in Burlington. Nuance is here in Burlington. And I bought it. And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun to use. It's also sometime a little awkward. I hadn't picked up the phone. I forgot to shut it off, and I talked for 20 minutes and then looked down on my computer, and there was all of my dialogue on the screen. But anyway, and I had to erase it all. But yeah, I've been doing some writing, but I'm involved in a lot. Burlington isn't of itself.
Do you have a book in mind? Possibly, or you're thinking about it?
I think I told you the story. When I came to Burlington, I didn't know anything about this community. When I ran for office, I didn't know anything really about this community. And what I did is I went over and I had lunch with the seniors in the senior center. I spent multiple afternoons them telling me stories. I know where all the bodies are buried, quote unquote. It's because the seniors told me. Here we are now, 31 years and counting later. I need to put some of those stories in writing that I know about me and whatever, because I may not be at the senior center. Who is going to talk about that verbal history? And we lose too much of that. How many of our seniors have passed on that would have been wonderful guests here, could have told you so much. But you know what? Their stories are lost.
Gentleman right there is a good example.
Stories would be lost. And you know, one of the things I do in this community, Ella, my wife, is we committed in this community and just other places, because I'm a public speaker, because I'm a professional speaker. She said nobody in this town or our friends and family will ever die without a good eulogy. We've been to services, to religious services, and the clergyman just didn't know who they were. But you couldn't take the time. So I've given many eulogies. And to find out about these people, and to find out what they really did, who they really were, I got to put that in writing for me, let alone for my friends, to find out that the custodian of a building that I knew in Malden was one of the most decorated decorated Vietnam era veterans, a Micmac Indian, and never told those stories except to me. And I wrote them down. And when he passed on, I gave his eulogy and stood up in front of his whole family and told all his stories. You know what? They didn't know one
They
word.
didn't know them.
They
Yeah.
didn't know them.
Wow.
A postal worker friend that I had, who I happened to go on a road trip with. We drove 16 hours in one day, on one long day, and for 16 hours he told me stories about him of his life and him as within his job, and I wrote some of them down and we passed on. His family didn't know those stories. We are losing this in this area. No one has the time. I got to put some time together to write some of these stories down. Not only mine, but I've got a lot of stories from them. I run home and I write a few things down so that I remember the story.
Life is too fast.
Life is too fast. And there are some terrific stories out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
There are terrific stories out there. Who looks at the pictures on your camera anymore? Half the time we don't even print them out anymore.
Right.
We used to, when we had a Brownie Starmite camera, we'd take the film out and we'd have it processed, and there'd all those be those pictures, and you throw them in a drawer. Guess what? 100 years later, you could take them out and, gee, this is his history. Now, what if the camera breaks?
Yeah.
What if you don't print them out? Nobody looks at it. We don't have the time. You've got to make the
Yeah.
time for
You've
these
got to
people.
make the time. Exactly right. Wow. That's a very good lesson. I completely agree.
Not that I want you to go anywhere. That does somebody know your stories?
Yeah, that's
That's good.
exactly it. I have to tell you, I have to go to a funeral on Sunday. My cousin, first cousin, former president of Roger Williams University, just passed away, had a heart attack. I just heard about it 2 days ago. As I think about him and his story, I don't know if anyone is going to write his story, but I understand and I completely agree with what you're saying. The time goes by and so many wonderful things happen, and people are basically pretty damn good. I mean, overall, you know, you really have to look for someone who is out of line one way or another. And you want to write those things down that are these good people do, like you, that gentleman, the two or three people that you mentioned. You want to write them down. Do you like to write?
I don't have the time to write. I unfortunately,
Yeah, but now see, you've got to do that same thing that
I've
you just
got to
hey,
do
yeah,
exactly what, but I am doing it. I have told these stories to my kids, and they've told me tremendous stories as they are now top professionals. We got to share them, but they've got to find some way of keeping them. These stories are gone, and in our electronic age, one would think that they would be kept. Right now, we're losing them.
We're losing.
We're losing.
We pay more attention to the fleeting and almost the meaningless, or only that which is required. We do it and move on. Never stop to think about a person, about a life, about a background. There's so much good stuff in the world.
I think the best story that I can tell which exhibits this, and this is a great closing story, is I happened to be in New Orleans, and I came into my meeting early so I could do a little antiquing and to run into an antique store. And I walked in, and there was a woman in her 90s who was crying, and I got to talk to her, and I said, "What's going on?" And she shut the door and locked the door in and told me a story about her experiences in the Holocaust.
Oh,
And she
wow.
said to me she had never told anybody, and someone needed to know. And I happened to walk into that store at that time, and she locked me in. Well, I ended up crying. She was crying. I was there 5 hours. I missed my meeting totally. As a director who was supposed to be sitting in the back, I finally cleaned myself up and went into the meeting and sat down, and the lights came on, and they thanked me for being at the meeting. I'll tell you, I wrote her story. Her story will never be forgotten now. And probably it was not a good thing for me to miss the meeting. It was probably a bad thing for miss the meeting. But I'll tell you, it changed me. It changed me, and it made me look at life a little bit differently and look at history a little bit differently. That story must be told. And that's what we need to do. Maybe that's what we need to end on.
how many there's only one Dr. Weiner. Sadly, there's only one. I mean, you are filled with ideas, with stuff that you've done.
30 seconds left.
How long? 30 seconds? Oy, 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 oy. So many things. 30 seconds. I'm done. 30 seconds left on our program. I don't know how to say thank you to Dr. Weiner. If you haven't heard this program, and if someone who has, I urge you to tell your neighbor to look at it. It will be rerun. You can check with BCAT. And so far as my guest is concerned, I don't know how to say thank you. I just
You're very welcome. I
You're,
loved it.
No, you're a fascinating individual. You've got life in every vein. You've got. You know what it is? It's the joy of living. It really is. It's the joy of living. I mean, just talking about that lady and wanting to absorb her agony and whatnot. It's celebrating life. That's exactly what she was doing. At any rate, I don't know how to say thank you other than God bless you, really. I hope you come back. Your
Thank
story,
you.
you have, you know, I feel as though we've covered maybe this much, and we have this much more to go.
Thank you.
Will you come back?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you to this crew who put up with us.
Thank you. Are we off now?